Hello everyone, please listen to me and spread this video to the world, okay? Today marks the 80th anniversary since the end of the Greater East Asian War. There are fewer people who clearly remember the war. Many years passed, and adults who were alive at the end of the war are now over 100 years old. We can say that the Greater East Asian War is now a part of our history. However, we need to review how the war began. We must not repeat the catastrophe of the war. Although the Japanese government has avoided these reviews, the direct cause of the Greater East Asian War was the complete stop of oil exports from America in August 1941. At that time, it meant our country would die. Japan depended on American oil, which made up 80% of all Japan's consumption. We don't know exactly how much oil we had at the time. Even if we had 6 months' worth of oil, most of Japan's economic activities would have stopped by February 1942. Of course, the American government understood that. So we had two choices. We could either accept the hard note from America or invade Dutch Indonesia to get our fares. There is no doubt that if we had accepted the hard note, we could have avoided instant death instead of a slow death. In this situation, Japanese people would have been controlled by the great powers of West Europe and America, like many other people in the world. At the beginning of the 20th century, the world was different from the world we see now. Almost all the colored people in Asia, Africa, and Latin America didn't have their own independent countries. They were ruled and exploited mercilessly by white people from powerful countries. The history of European colonization goes back to the 15th century. This is known as the Age of Discovery. Powerful countries colonized almost all regions where non-white people lived until the 19th century. Japan, which is located in the Far East, was the last region that powerful countries didn't colonize. In the second half of the 19th century, Japan was forced to end its national isolation by Perry and his Kurofune. However, the ancestors of Japanese people desperately defended against their desire to colonize us and our country. Unfortunately, it was common for change the current situation by military force at the time. It was a world where the stronger paid on the weaker. The Meiji government took steps to increase national wealth and military power for invasion by powerful countries and focused on developing Japanese industry. Japan's modernization moved closer to the West Europe and America at an incredible speed. In the end, Japan was able to keep its independence as a country. This fact was rare in the world history. At the beginning of the 20th century, Japan fought against Russia with a policy of expanding southward. It was the first war Japan fought against the white people. If Japan had been defeated, we might have been controlled by Russia. After that, Russia might have included us and brainwashed us into believing that communism was correct. We would have fallen into the fate that the republics of Central Asia and the autonomous regions faced. It was normal for white people to control non-white people. But Japan won against Russia. This major event surprised the West, Europe, and America. It gave hope to non-white people around the world. After World War I, at the peace conference, Japan tried hard to ensure that there was no discrimination against non-white people in the League of Nations rules. Now, it's common for the whole world to share the belief against racial discrimination. We are proud that Japan was the first to support this belief in the world. But unfortunately, this belief was rejected by both America and England. Western countries became more jealous when they saw that Japan won against Russia and became the victorious nation. Especially, America was trying to take Japan's rights and interests in Manchuria and started a policy to exclude Japanese immigrants. Gradually, America saw Japan as an imaginary enemy. Gap between Japan and the powerful countries grew because they supported the Republic of China in its conflict with Japan over Manchuria. These historical details are very complicated, so it's hard to explain them in a short speech. The whole note from America demanded that Japan gave up its rights and interests in Manchuria. Today, some people believe that Japan took Manchuria from the Republic of China. However, this is a clear mistake. Manchuria was originally inhabited by Joseon people. However, when the Republic of China was established, it declared that it had gained Manchuria, but China never had sovereignty over Manchuria. In addition, the Han Chinese people also never possessed Manchuria before Chinese self-centered insistence. Manchuria was recognized as an unrelated place by the past Han Chinese dynasties. By the way, this discussion covers several centuries of history. Considering the factors of Greater East Asia War, we can ignore colonialism and domination over non-white people by powerful countries. The Greater East Asia War and World War II overlap with each other in many respects, so we tend to think both wars are the same. However, it's important to note that these two wars are indeed different. During almost the same period, Germany fought against England, France, the Soviet Union, and America, which entered the war later. Japan fought against the enemies of Germany. Thus, the former and the latter were quite unlike each other. Speaking the Greater East Asia War, we often hear that Japan invaded Asia countries, but this is clearly incorrect. At that time, Japan fought against the powerful countries such as England, France, Netherlands, and America. These countries invaded Southeast Asia, so there were no countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, Colombia, or Myanmar. We don't make excuse for our past responsibility to occupy these areas. Japan sometimes took resources from these countries with severity. However, thanks to Japan, in the end, many independent countries were created in Southeast Asia because Japan expelled the powerful countries. The former president of Singapore, Goh Chok Tong, said this: "The Japanese army's control was brutal for us, but the control of powerful countries was broken because of Japan's victories." Asian people gained confidence that they would also not lose to Westerners. After Japan lost the war, within 15 years, all the colonies in Asia were liberated. The former president of India, Sarvepalli, said this: "At that time, it was unavoidable that the Prince of Wales Court and Singapore would think. But the Asian people, just like them, saw Japan think England's battleship perfectly. Seeing these brilliant achievements, they were very shocked, and their minds changed to believe they could do it too. The former Chief of State of Myanmar, Burma, said this: "In terms of history, no country fought as much as Japan for the liberty of Asia. We don't make excuses about our occupation. Instead, they are prizes for Japan." But from a broad point of view, it's clear that Asian countries became independent due to the fight of Japanese army. It's understandable that the function of Japan was significant in this historic fact. After the Greater East Asia War, many Japanese soldiers remained on the battlefield and fought alongside Asian soldiers. They fought against powerful countries, risking their lives for Asian independence. So, the brave actions of Japanese soldiers deserve recognition. In Indonesia, about 2,000 Japanese soldiers fought alongside Indonesians for 4 years against the Netherlands and helped bring Indonesia independence. Many soldiers died in this war and rest in the Eros cemetery there. This means that Japanese soldiers sacrificed their lives for the independence of Indonesia. They could have returned to Japan because the war was over. Today, the opinion that attack Japan's responsibility for the war, both at home and abroad, is not correct. To blame only Japan for the Greater East Asia War. If you think that only Japan did something wrong, this is without considering the history of the powerful countries and the pressure on Japan after the Meiji Restoration. You will not understand the important part of the Greater East Asian War. The 20th century had many wars. There were many conflicts. There were 2 world wars. During the Greater East Asia War, Japan took many lives in several countries. At the same time, Japan also lost the lives of 3 million people. This included 2.3 million soldiers who did for the Japan they left. On the Japanese mainland, Japan suffered from the Great Tokyo Air Race. And on top of that, as you can see, the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. These disasters are rare in world history. However, after the war, Japan developed a negative view of history. This view said that only Japan was bad. This kind of thinking is obviously unbalanced. If you only blame Japan and ignore the powerful countries and the Republic of China in the war, having a sense of atonement is not bad. However, self-deprecating thoughts can distort understanding of history and stop us from thinking. Today, unfortunately, the misunderstanding that only Japan was bad is causing conflict between parts of Asia and Japan. After the war, Japan rebuilt and developed its economy. It also contributed to the world peace. So the world was left in utter disbelief by this. Japan is helping developing countries, including those that were once Japanese occupied, and building strong alliance and goodwill with former enemy America. It has been 80 years since the war. We believe that Japan has atoned for its actions in the war. At least the Japanese people who are alive today have no reason to feel any guilty. Looking back at the war, which has become history, is work made for historians. We should not make history a political issue, but we aspire to learn from history about how to construct peace and prosperity of the future. Long live Japan! Long live our emperor! Thank you. Bye-bye.